Hey, you're listening to Faith in Action. I'm your host, Matthew Nowlin.
And I'm Shawn Green.
We lead Conservative Christians of Tennessee, and we are thankful you're listening to this show. Conservative Christians of Tennessee exists to analyze political policy and politicians in Tennessee, and all from a conservative Christian worldview, whether they have a clerical collar or a bad suit or are in Nashville. We're going to look at them all to support Conservative Christians of Tennessee in our educational efforts, our public policy analyses, and any other needed endeavors. You can give a one-time or a recurring gift at patreon.com/TN Christian. Now, we want to glorify God, and the way we want to do that is by helping you to glorify God. So if you have any questions or comments that you think would be helpful to us or to you, you can reach me directly by emailing Matthew@tnchristian.com.
Or Shawn, SHAWN, @tnchristian.com.
And today's show is brought to you in the Memphis area by Herbi-Systems. Give Herbi-Systems a call at 901-290-7774 for all your lawn care needs. Since 1984, Herbi-Systems has been the premier lawn care and landscape company in the Mid-South. So give Herbi-Systems a call, 901-290-7774, or visit Herbi-Systems.com and let them kill your weeds. Our scriptures for today are from Ezekiel, the 3rd chapter, verses 10 through 11. Moreover, he said unto me, Son of man, all my words that I shall speak unto thee, receive in thine heart, and hear with thine ears, and go, get thee to them of the captivity, unto the children of thy people, and speak unto them, and tell them, Thus saith the Lord God, whether they will hear or whether they will forbear. Listeners, we have a nation today, and it seems to be led mostly by cowardly lions. Leaders bluster and they growl, but in reality, they lack the courage to stand up to any mouse that has truth on their side. Recently, we watched as Senate confirmation hearings for today's guests turned really into a circus sideshow, and all for one reason, because elected officials lack the courage to listen to the truth. These committee members worship the spirit of the age, which is a feelings-first spirit that leads to feelings-first governance. Because of their blind acceptance of lies, Republicans and Democrats in D.C. turned what should have been a great appointment into a display of woke worship. It could have been right out of the Southern Baptist Convention 5 years ago. These elected officials told the world they want to believe the lies of the world more than the truth. President Trump nominated Jeremy Carl for the post of Assistant Secretary of State for International Organization Affairs. Jeremy Carl would have been excellent in that position since he is incredibly qualified in that arena. His entire life's work gives him the experience and the wisdom to know how to oversee groups like the United Nations. The woke, anti-Israel, anti-white, anti-Christian, anti-truth United Nations that should be bulldozed anyway. The UN that lies about racial inequity. Yes, that UN. But that's just it. Jeremy Carl has a track record of calling out racism. Jeremy Carl has a track record of calling out lies. Jeremy pushes back on political overreach no matter where he sees it. Members of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee found facts to be too much to handle. But the predictable comments came when the committee realized Carl pointed out the very real cultural discrimination that has been going on against whites. In his book, he dared to write, quote, whites such as this author who advocate for their legitimate interests will be falsely labeled as white nationalists and like, thus raising the costs of speaking out to a level that most find unacceptably high. And Jeremy Carl found out exactly how high the cost of truth is. The Republicans on the committee could not even come together to advance his nomination. Because of Republican stupidity, it was clear that Jeremy Carl's nomination was going nowhere. So being the ever bold champion of truth, Jeremy removed his name from consideration and walked away. The truth was told, people could not face it. And now the woke lies of this age will continue to harm more people. And folks, we're happy to have Jeremy Carl back with us again, fresh from his congressional hearings. Jeremy is a senior fellow at the Claremont Institute, where his primary focus is on immigration, multiculturalism, race relations, and nationalism in America. Now, prior to joining Claremont, Jeremy worked for decades as a research fellow at the Hoover Institute at Stanford University, serving as a policy advisor. He is the author of the book, The Unprotected Class, How Anti-White Racism is Tearing America Apart, which has received substantial national attention, again, even becoming the focus point of a congressional hearing. His political writing and commentary has been featured in and cited by outlets such as Fox News, CNN, the New York Times, and Time Magazine. Jeremy Carl, welcome back to Faith in Action. It's a pleasure.
Thanks so much. It's a real pleasure to be with you.
So We need to get two things out. First, when we had you on last time, we talked about your book and we told everyone lacking reading comprehension that folks were going to call you racist. You predicted exactly how they would react in your book. So that's point one. But secondly, we want to both thank you for being brave enough to speak the truth without bending to incredible pressures. I mean, it's crazy to watch from far away, but incredible pressures that were put on you as people tried to paint you as a racist. We need more people who are willing to stand alone for truth. Where did you get that kind of courage?
Well, thank you. I mean, I wouldn't want to claim anything very much for me, but I will tell you, this was truly a situation where I just put on the full armor of God beforehand, and that was the whole difference. I went in, I knew that I was metaphorically Daniel going into the lion's den, and I knew that they were going to say the sorts of things that they did say about me, and it wasn't really my own strength that was leading me to whatever helpful thing I was able to do, but really just that I was trusting in God. And that was really, God was my audience. That was it. I mean, I wasn't worried about whatever the Senate was going to say about me, or what the media was going to say about me. I just was interested in the truth, as you guys so quickly put it. And so I wasn't afraid from that perspective. I was actually really calm during the entire hearing. And I think it was more difficult for my friends and my family and folks like that, my friends from church, who are not particularly political people, to kind of see me get dragged through the mud like that. But as for me, I kind of, I was prepared and ready for what happened. Disappointed, obviously, but not surprised.
Yeah, apolitical people are like the weirdest kind of political people.
I'm proud that you took the stand, Jared. That, to me, there are these moments where we've seen in history where the borking of different, Supreme Court justices, this tradition has become very ugly. And so I want to thank you, because at some point there's going to be good men who will no longer put their name in the hat to take these positions when they're treated this way. So I want to thank you for taking that abuse for us, because you do love our country, and it was unfair the way you were treated. And I thank you for doing it with character.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, Shawn took on the unenviable task of running your confirmation controversy through AI logic.
Yeah.
So he asked Claude, and Claude is like the most teenage girl of the AIs, or maybe the most cat lady of them, or whatever you want to call it. But he asked it if your claims about Israel or racism were anti-Semitic or hateful based on race or prejudice. And I'm sure you're not going to be surprised to hear it. So it immediately spit back a response saying how genuinely controversial your views were. But Shawn pressed a little more. And when he asked it to cite your racist claims and to prove that you held immoral or hateful positions, the AI actually apologized. Wow. And said it was wrong. And we want to get your reaction to what it said, which was, quote, "The Jeremy Carl situation is actually a good illustration of the phenomenon he himself wrote about, that the cost of making certain arguments has been artificially raised so high that it becomes a political liability independent of whether or not the arguments are correct."
Yeah, well, that's fascinating. Maybe I should have done that. I should have been clever enough to think of running it through AI. I'd love to see that if you want to send it to me after the show. But yeah, I mean, I knew that was going to be out there. And I think, one nice thing was that I think a couple things for folks who were even vaguely independently minded, who watched that hearing, I think they might have gone away being like, yeah, wow, this guy's maybe not being treated entirely fairly. And then partially as a result of that, I had an opportunity to go on Ross Douthat's podcast for the New York Times a couple of weeks later, which is a very huge audience. And I was able to really kind of get out the fact that my views on these sorts of things are very reasonable. And Ross pushed back. I mean, we don't have the same views on these, but I heard from a lot of people, not necessarily with the same views that you or I might have, but kind of people in that mushy middle who just sort of said, hey, I didn't recognize the same person that was described in that Senate hearing from the very reasonable person who was being interviewed there. And so, I think it did give me just a chance to get that out in front of a different audience. Yeah. And that was nice.
Some of those senators really practiced their pouty frowns on you. It was, man. So
it was theater. That's what I was told by my team when I went in. It was theater. Cory Booker in particular, is a true full-on theater kid. Senator Rosen wasn't much better, but that's what it is. I mean, it was a show for them. They came in, they said their lines, and then they left.
Was the book the difference between this and your last confirmation hearing?
Well, I didn't have a confirmation hearing last time. Last time I was in the highest level thing
Okay.
where I was nominated by the president, but I did not need a Senate confirmation. But yeah, I mean, the book was out there, although they seized comments I had on X and other things like that. And it was just, it was unfortunate that it was such an unserious discussion. I mean, I think we were talking about this a little bit before the show.
I can't believe it, Jeremy. It's like you need to give me your next Super Bowl picks for the next 50 years because you called the shot. You predicted exactly what they were going to say. You wrote it down in your book. Yeah. And there's no denying. You said exactly how they were going to react, and they did it almost as if they were reading your text as a roadmap.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, it's unfortunate, right? I've just seen this and I knew how it would play out. And I think, again, part of the other good news is that particularly among a lot of young people, I mean, I reach so many young people with the book in particular. I mean, certainly from all ages, but particularly for young people, particularly young men, I found. And I got an invitation to speak to a group after that. I was actually just out in DC last week speaking at the invitation of a number of younger White House staffers who were really, they're big fans of me and my work and what I'm saying. And they kind of took what happened at my hearing to heart. And so there's a lot of good people. There's a lot of good people in the administration trying to do the right thing. And part of this is just a generational thing where our senators are sort of scared. They don't know how to talk about these sorts of things. Don't think they're allowed to talk about these sorts of things. And then, to be less generous, just some of them are not willing to put in the effort that it would take to try to persuade people. And so it's easier for them to kind of back off.
The woke virus is almost, it's almost like if you were born after it came out, you can't develop an immunity to it. But if you were in the womb anytime after it happened, it's like there's some kind of in utero. Yeah. Because the young guys just don't care, man. I mean, it's the opposite of caring. I mean, they recognize the destruction, but some of these boomers and Xers and even some millennials, man, they think it matters. And
well, I have 3 teenage sons, so I see that for sure what you're talking about. But I'd say beyond that, right? It's also a little bit of different life experiences that the younger people have had. I mean, I talked about this with Ross a little bit. I'm 53. I was of the age where certainly, I dealt with some of these challenges, but I could also navigate around them. I mean, if you were sort of good enough, you could kind of maneuver around, you could make things pretty good for yourself, et cetera. Even though I always tell people, and I tell my own sons, you can't make excuses, period, because it's just not good for you, just for totally selfish reasons. But the reality is for the generations below me, certainly when you start getting into the younger millennials and the Zoomers, there was no escape for them. And so this reality has been just frankly pretty oppressive for them, and they're going to speak out about it, and they're not going to be apologetic.
Yeah. Well, listeners, we're going to get back to this in just a second, but first I want to tell you about our sponsor, Navita IT Managed Solutions. Navita IT Managed Services is much more than a help desk. They're more than a network administrator. Navita has decades of business consulting and analytics experience. Navita IT Managed Services works to keep your business growing as a healthy part of God's kingdom, and they help churches at Navita. They help businesses steward their resources to become the best business and church leaders possible. So visit NavitaIT.com today to learn more about Navita IT Managed Solutions. And we are excited to have a Christian-owned business like Navita. We consider them aligned on board with us this year, and we know that you will love using Navita for all your IT solutions. And we're back with Jeremy Carl of the Claremont Institute. Now, when you came on the show last time, we talked about your book. We thought, well, I guess Shawn thought, I didn't think.
I thought it.
Shawn thought it would get ignored just for the title.
I did. I got to admit it.
I loved the title, but it turns out your courage in covering this topic was inspired. So you put the controversial stuff on the cover. This is a book that you can judge by the cover. People were forced to admit this problem exists, or they could look away and allow it to continue. So you committed an act of delivering unflinching truth. That's exactly what America needs right now. It's not mean, it's accurate. Some people would say it's hateful. I think it's very realistic. Is this not how America operated until about like 15 minutes ago?
Well, I think at its best, we certainly did. And that was just my view. And I mean, I tried to write it. I think anybody who reads the book, again, those are the other people who probably didn't recognize the person, described in the Senate hearing. I mean, it's a very reasonable book. It's not a polemical book. But I think one really satisfying thing for me about the book, I mean, I think there were 2 sort of satisfying things. One was the degree of influence it had on actual policymaking in the Trump administration. Obviously, can't get too much into the specifics there, but it was read by a lot of people who had decision-making authority. And then the second was that the change in language. When I put on anti-white racism in the title, even some of my allies were like, they sort of like puckered, like, can we say that? And now, I mean, certainly you still have that, okay? But to a much, much greater degree, we even have politicians who will just go out using that term right now. So I really brought that into the lexicon, and that was really satisfying.
Yeah. Who in elected office uses that phrase to the best effect?
There's no one person I'd think of. You mentioned it. I don't know that Brandon Gill has used it, but I think he probably has it. A new congressman from Texas who's very, very good. Again, a younger guy, right? He's 31. He would be among them. But, I was asked by a caucus of 18 sort of conservative congressmen to address one of their meetings about the book as a breakfast meeting. So it was out there. I heard from, I did have a number of champions in the Senate, a couple of them public, but most of them, because they weren't on the committee, it wasn't even necessarily appropriate for them to have spoken publicly. But there are some good folks out there. I don't want to just paint everybody with a broad brush, even though obviously the cowardice of a lot of them was disappointing, if not surprising.
Yes, very much so. Jeremy, it's clear we can't do confirmations like this anymore.
Right.
Something has changed. The Senate didn't even have public confirmation hearings until 1916. This is all made for TV drama now. Confirmations in the 80s, they weren't even until the 80s. It didn't even go to committees. It was an up or down, yay, nay vote by the Senate floor. And then they moved on to other business. I mean, you really had to be somebody to be opposed by the Senate after getting nomination. It had to be drastic. There had to be a big reason. Now confirmation hearings are the battlefield of political warfare. What's the solution for this confirmation process so that we can work together again for appointments? And even specifically, this is going to be a nightmare for the future of the Supreme Court.
Yeah, well, Shawn, I'm glad you mentioned that, and I'm glad you went into some of the history, right? Because we haven't always done things like that. If you go back to the first cabinet, obviously the government was much smaller, but it was just a handful of these positions that were subject to confirmation at all. Now we have about 1,000 separated, and even prior to the nomination being a twinkle in my eye, I have advocated for quite some time that we dramatically reduce the number of positions that would be subject to a confirmation. My position, again, it's a very important position. There's a reason why I had to go through a year of rigmarole on it. And it has real authority. So I'm not trying to poor mouth it. At the same time, even pretty politically involved people could not have told you the previous 3 or 4 people who had my position, right? And so, what I would say is we want to get to a point where, the top 100 or 200 positions in government are going through this. And the rest of them, the president should have the ability of either party, by the way, to build his team. And I think why it's particularly foolish that we as a party have not taken it on is that this has an asymmetric effect. So when the Democrats don't get their guys in, guess who's running the government? It's a bunch of Democrats. When the Republicans don't get their guys in, guess who's running the government? It's a bunch of Democrats, right? That's just how it works. And so it's not equally damaging for us and the Democrats when we can't get folks in. But unfortunately, I think you're not going to be able to clean up the process very much in the near term. But what maybe you can do is subject fewer people like me to it, give the president more of an ability to build his team without this sort of interference.
Yeah. And I don't think that would be as damaging as people think, simply because if the Democrats get everything they want, that would be a shock to this nation. I think the revolt, it's one thing to boil the frog slowly.
Yeah.
But if they just came in and got everything they want and oiled that machinery up, it would be terrible.
Yeah.
But it would also be terrible for them, in my opinion.
No, I think that's right, for sure. It would be a little bit of a shock. But I think also, honestly, just given what is acceptable discourse, the difference between their guys and what's acceptable versus the people who are truly our guys and what is publicly acceptable in the Senate is a lot bigger. Again, you see this, and I've now been asked twice to speak at the White House, right? As opposed to, there's a lot of people in the administration who are very supportive of me, but yet the senators get very skittish. I don't think the Democrats have that problem in the same way. And again, I think if you're still keeping those top 100, 200 positions subject to confirmation. So the really important battles you can and should put before the Senate, but it's a lot of this other stuff that really we could skip that process. And I think that's probably the best way to go forward.
I mean, you're subjected to a process very similar to what a Supreme Court justice is going through, but there's no lifetime appointment.
No. I mean, again, I was offered this position verbally by a senior member of the Department of State 7 days before the administration started. I waited more than a year just to even get a hearing.
Right. Well, listeners, it's always our privilege to remind you about the mission of equipping the persecuted. This group has been on the ground for many years doing the Lord's work to save fellow Christians and rescue orphans in Nigeria. The persecuted Christians in Nigeria need food, clothing, shelter, medical care, and help building a safer way of life. Your monthly donation creates sustainable help for real Christians that have been attacked by brutal Muslim jihadists. Please visit equippingthepersecuted.org today. You can sponsor an orphan of Christian parents for $35 a month, or now you can order African coffee and have it shipped straight to your home. Every bag of Equipping the Persecuted coffee that you purchase does more than fill your cup. It strengthens the body of Christ because 100% of the proceeds go directly to persecuted Christians in Nigeria. They have great flavors you can try today. Again, that's equippingthepersecuted.org. And we know, because they contact us on Facebook, the persecuted Christians in Nigeria. Thank you. And folks, we're back again with Jeremy Carl. We've been talking largely about the concept of truth today. And hopefully Christians have seen the bold, unflinching stance we need our leaders to take, even if it costs them everything, a little bit in this story with Jeremy Carl. Jeremy, do you see your time in the Senate circus as sort of a modern day Roman Colosseum moment? Are we going to keep seeing Christians thrown to modern day political lions, or is this the beginning, and I pray it is, of a great awakening of sorts?
Well, I obviously hope it's the latter, but God is in control of that. I'm actually very comforted by that, right? Because it's just, I don't need to worry, right? Like, all I needed to do was go and do my best. I didn't need to worry whether it was good enough. I didn't need to worry that I had the plan or I had the knowledge. I just need to go out, speak the truth as best I could. And I knew that God would be in control of whatever result that he wanted. I do think this is a generational thing. I fully expect that, in 40 years, I'll be tottering up on some stage to receive some award for bravery, because it will be, like long past the time that it would have actually substantively mattered for me. But hopefully this will be a turning point, right? That's the goal. I mean, the other possibility is it just will sort of keep getting worse. But I actually do think that what we're doing is not sustainable.
The Lord, it seems like he created this world in a way where people end up screaming for competency if it's removed for some unnatural reason. And that's really, that's the hope of young men. When they see somebody like you have gained influence despite, I mean, you said earlier, you're sort of in that borderline age group, but you've really gained a lot of influence specifically because you have a competent ability to analyze and write on topics. So, just to any young men, I hope that they realize that competency is a lifeline that the Lord is throwing to them in a way. So we saw Claremont recently released a book that celebrated a 25-year milestone. You guys are coming up to 25 years this fall. You do amazing work, and congratulations to Claremont. We love Claremont. I mean, I think we said last time how many Claremont folks it seems like we interview. What's next for Jeremy Carl and Claremont?
Yeah, well, I'm actually working on another book, and that's been really gratifying. I mean, one of the many challenges I had in being in this government ethics process for so long, which really restricted me in all sorts of ways, was, I had an unsigned book contract on my desk for probably 8 months. So now I can sign that. I'm working on a book that has the working title called "What's the Matter with Minnesota?"
Ooh,
and it had that long before these recent riots. I had that title, and it's basically looking at liberal whites and how uniquely destructive they've been as a force. And again, just like my first book, it's not a polemical book. It's really analytical. And in fact, from a Christian perspective, I actually locate the origins of this in Unitarianism in the early 19th century, when you have guys coming up at Harvard denying the Trinity, that leads to the social gospel, and that leads to leftism. I mean, I'm obviously giving you the speed running thing, Jewish leftism, feminism. I talk about all these things in the book, but that's the book I'm working on next. I'm hoping to get that done in the next 6 months or so, and then hopefully get it out in the marketplace pretty soon.
Yeah. As we close today, I want you to remember the words of Charlie Kirk. Jeremy Carl is terrific. Everybody go buy the book. They're going to do their best to censor it, to smear it, and to slander it. It's a significant accomplishment. But listeners, you can order The Unprotected Class, How Anti-White Racism is Tearing America Apart on Amazon today. Listeners, speak the truth. Thank you for stopping by each week to stay informed on these issues as they relate to our church and our families. Remember that on tnchristian.com, we have links to past shows. If you want to support our work, be sure to visit patreon.com/tnchristian. And until next week, remember our favorite promise from the book of Exodus. It is true. The Lord shall reign forever and ever.